The ballroom was a sea of gold braid and polished metals, the chandeliers casting their approving light on every face but mine. I stood near the back, my heels planted on the marble floor, my posture straight as a dress sword. The caterers had already cleared my plate before I had finished the first course, and the seating chart had placed me at a table with the hired photographer and the event coordinator. I was not meant to be seen. My father, Richard Hendricks, adjusted the microphone with the easy confidence of a man who had spent 40 years believing the world existed to applaud him. The room settled into respectful silence. He scanned the crowd, his eyes gliding past me without stopping, and began his speech. "Everyone here is a success," he boasted, his voice rich with practiced warmth. "Every officer I served with, every friend who stood by me, every member of my family who made me proud." He paused. The silence stretched. My mother, Patricia, nodded from her seat at the head table, her smile frozen in that particular way she had perfected over 3 decades of public performances. My brother Derek sat beside her, his jaw lifted, his hands folded on the tablecloth like he was accepting an award himself. "Everyone," my father repeated, "except my useless child." He pointed at me. His finger, steady and unapologetic, aimed directly at my chest. "I'm just telling the truth," he said, his verbal tick landing like a second blow. "We all have our disappointments. My wandering soldier who never quite made it. This celebration isn't for you, perhaps it's best if you leave." I did not flinch. I did not drop my gaze. I did not let my hands tremble. I set my clutch purse on the empty chair beside me with deliberate precision, the leather making a soft sound against the upholstery, and I noticed the way his left eye twitched when I did not immediately obey. The tiny muscle above his cheekbone, betraying the crack in his confidence. He had expected me to crumble. He had rehearsed this moment, I realized, and I was ruining it by not crying. I rose from my seat in silence. "My name is Claire Hendricks. I am 32 years old. I am a captain in the United States Army. I have a bronze star with Valor device pinned to the inside of my dress jacket. I have a purple heart that still aches when the weather shifts over the scar tissue on my ribs. I have completed 3 combat tours. I have never, not once, begged my father for his approval. But he did not know any of that, he had never asked. The room was watching. I could feel the weight of their stares, the confused murmurs, the polite discomfort of people who had come to celebrate a man's retirement and were now witnessing a public execution. I walked toward the exit, my heels striking the floor at a steady, unhurried pace. I would not run. I would not give them the satisfaction of my haste. My mother leaned slightly toward my father and whispered something behind her hand. I did not need to hear the words, I knew them. I had heard variations of them my entire life. "What will people think?" She had said it at my high school graduation when I walked the stage alone because they had chosen Derek's soccer tournament. She had said it at my enlistment ceremony when she refused to attend. She had said it at the hospital when I called to tell them I had been wounded, and she asked if the neighbors would find out. What will people think? I reached the heavy oak doors of the ballroom. The brass handle was cold under my palm. I pulled it open, feeling the draft from the hallway beyond, tasting the freedom of the exit. A firm hand touched my elbow. "Claire." The voice was low, gravelly, familiar in a way that made me stop instantly. I turned. General Thomas Whitfield stood before me. He was 73 years old, retired now for nearly 8 years, but he still carried himself like a man who had commanded battalions. His uniform was impeccable, his medals arranged with the precision of someone who had pinned them on 1,000 times. His eyes were wet. "Are you the one who saved my son in Afghanistan?" he asked. I kept my face still and said nothing. He already knew. I could see it in the way his jaw tightened, in the way his hand trembled slightly against my elbow. He knew. General Whitfield turned to face the room. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of a man who had never needed a microphone to be heard. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "this woman you just dismissed saved my son's life. She has a bronze star with valor. She is a hero." The silence that followed was not the polite silence of before. It was a vacuum. It was the sound of a room full of people realizing they had been complicit in something they did not understand. My father's face drained of color. My mother's mask cracked at the edges. Derek looked like he had been struck across the mouth. General Whitfield reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope, the official Army seal visible in the chandelier light. "I have orders here," he said. "Effective immediately, Captain Hendricks is promoted to Major with a full commendation ceremony next week. She will be recognized for her service, something this family never gave her." He handed it to me. I took it. The paper was crisp, official, real. I looked at my father. His jaw hung loose. His hands had dropped to his sides. His retirement party, his carefully curated legacy, was now the stage for my vindication. He had no comeback. He had no speech prepared for this. He had never imagined a scenario in which I did not simply disappear. I smiled. Not a wide smile, not a triumphant smile. A small, quiet, knowing smile that said everything and nothing. And I said nothing. I turned and walked through the doors. The envelope pressed against my chest. The sound of the ballroom fading behind me like a dream I was finally waking from. But that was only where it began. Let me tell you what city I am listening from, because that is the least of the confessions I am about to make. I am recording this from Austin, Texas, from a small apartment near the base that I have kept for 6 years. It has a window that faces a parking lot, and a fire escape I have never used, and a small wooden box on the shelf that contains the only things that matter to me. My grandfather's locket. My bronze star. A letter from General Whitfield that I have read exactly 17 times. Where are you listening from? I want to know. Not because it changes the story, but because it reminds me that I am not alone in this. That somewhere in a car, or a kitchen, or a quiet bedroom before sleep, someone else is sitting with the weight of a family that never saw them. If you have ever sat in a room where your own blood treated you like an inconvenient stranger, if you have ever been told that your presence was an embarrassment, if you have ever been the one who was asked to leave so everyone else could enjoy themselves, then this story is for you. Now, let me take you back to how this nightmare started. The world before the ballroom was a world of small cruelties. They did not arrive in dramatic gestures or explosive confrontations. They arrived in the spaces between holidays, in the silences on the phone, in the way my mother's eyes would slide past me at family dinners, like I was a ghost she had learned to live with. I was 17 when I first realized that my family had assigned me a role I had never auditioned for. It was a Tuesday evening in October. I had just finished my shift at the diner, the one I worked at to save money for college, because my parents had made it clear that their resources were reserved for Derek. My father sat at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper, the same newspaper he had been reading for an hour without turning a page. Mother stood at the stove, stirring something that smelled like onions and resignation. I got my acceptance letter, I said, holding up the envelope from the University of Texas. My father did not look up. That's nice. It's a full academic scholarship, I said, tuition and books. My mother's stirring paused for half a second, then resumed. Derek got into Georgetown, she said, as if that was the relevant information. He is going to be a lawyer. I put the letter back in my pocket. I did not mention that Derek's acceptance had been to the waitlist, not the actual program. I did not mention that my father had already paid his non-refundable deposit. I did not mention that I had been saving for 3 years while Derek had never held a job in his life. I learned early that the truth was not welcome at that table. I enlisted at 19. I did not tell them I was going. I signed the papers, completed basic training, and called them from Fort Benning to let them know. My mother's first words were not "Are you safe?" or "We are proud of you." They were "What will people think?" "They will think their daughter joined the army," I said. "HMPH," she said, and hung up. That was the pattern, years of it. I deployed to Afghanistan at 22. I sent letters home that were never answered. I sent money, significant amounts of it, through automatic allotments that I never mentioned, because I knew they would not thank me for it. I paid off the remaining balance on my mother's medical debt from her knee surgery. I covered the last semester of Derek's tuition when their accounts ran short. I did it quietly, through the Army's direct deposit system, under the name of a non-existent scholarship fund I had invented. They never asked where the money came from. They never thanked me. The first time I held my bronze star, I was alone in a medical tent in Kandahar. The surgeon had just finished stitching the shrapnel wound on my ribs. The medal was placed in my palm by a lieutenant colonel I had never met before, who told me that my actions had saved the lives of 7 men, including the son of General Thomas Whitfield. I put the medal in my grandfather's locket, the one he had given me when I was 12, the one he had worn through 2 wars of his own. I did not tell my family. I did not send a photograph. I let them believe I was still the wandering soldier, the disappointment, the one who had never quite made it. Because I knew, even then, that the truth would be wasted on them. The toxic dynamics of the Hendricks family operated like a well-rehearsed machine. My father was the enforcer, the one who delivered the verdicts. "I am just telling the truth" was his signature, his permission slip to say anything cruel without consequence. My mother was the architect, the one who designed the systems of exclusion, who decided which child would sit at which table, who managed the optics of abandonment. What will people think was her shield and her sword? And Derek was the beneficiary, the one who coasted on their approval, who absorbed their praise and their resources and never once asked where I was. He had his own verbal tick, delivered with the same smugness every holiday. I always knew I would be the one to make Mom and Dad proud. I never challenged it. I never argued. I stood at the edge of family photographs and smiled. I ate at the secondary table. I left early, always early, before the awkwardness of my presence could ruin the evening, but I kept records. I started after the first time I discovered the college fund. I was 24, stationed in Germany, when I received a letter from my mother's bank. It was a routine statement, sent to my permanent address by mistake. I opened it without expectation and found the account that held the family's college savings. The account I had never been told existed. Account that had paid for Derek's Georgetown tuition, his apartment, his living expenses, his bar exam preparation. The account that was empty now. And then I checked my own finances. I pulled up the records of the automatic allotments I had been sending home for years, the money I had earmarked for my mother's medical debt. The payments I had funneled into that mysterious scholarship fund that I had invented, I added them up. Twice. $50,000. Exactly $50,000. The same amount that had been in the college fund. The same amount that had been spent on Derek. I sat in my barracks room, staring at the numbers, and I understood something I had not allowed myself to see before. They had not just ignored me. They had used me. They had taken my money, my deployment pay, my hazard duty pay, my blood money, and they had spent it on the golden child while I was bleeding in a combat zone. I did not confront them. I did not call. I did not scream. I opened a file, a manila folder, the kind you can buy at any supply store. I labeled it with a single word, evidence. Inside, I placed a copy of the bank statement, a copy of my allotment records, a printed timeline of every payment I had made, every debt I had covered, every invisible act of service I had provided. And then I added more. I documented the birthdays they had forgot. I printed the emails they had never answered. I saved voicemails that had gone unreturned. I recorded the dates and times of every slight, every exclusion, every moment they had made it clear that I was not a member of their family but a liability they tolerated. I did not know what I would do with the file. I did not know when I would use it. But I knew, with the certainty of a soldier who has survived ambushes, that the truth was a weapon, and I was going to make sure it was sharp. The intercepted message came 3 months before the retirement party. It was a group text. I was not supposed to see it. My mother had accidentally added me to a thread she had intended for my father and Derek. It appeared on my phone at 6:47 in the morning, while I was still in my PT uniform, drinking coffee from a steel thermos. The message from my mother read, "I want her gone by the end of the first course. She ruins the energy. Richard, you need to handle it." My father replied, "I will mention her in the speech. Make it clear she does not belong." Derek added, "Can we just not invite her? She always makes it weird." My mother, "We have to invite her. What will people think if we don't, but we can make sure she leaves early." I read the thread 3 times. I did not cry. I did not throw my phone. I did not call them. I opened my file. I added screenshots. I saved the timestamps. I noted the exact wording. And I made a decision. I had been invisible to them for 10 years. I had been their safety net, their unacknowledged provider, their scapegoat. I had been the one who held everything together while they blamed me for falling apart. I was done, but I was not going to confront them. I was not going to argue. I was not going to give them the satisfaction of my anger. I was going to let them hang themselves. I called Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim, the JAG Corps officer I had worked with on a case 2 years ago. She was sharp, precise, and she owed me a favor. "Sarah," I said, "I need a sealed commendation order." "Claire," she said. "What are you planning?" "Nothing illegal," I said. "I just want to make sure the truth is ready when I need it." She paused, then, "I will have it ready by tomorrow." I hung up and looked at the file on my desk. The bronze star in my locket, the letter from General Whitfield, the bank statements, the screenshots. The truth was a weapon, and I was finally ready to use it. The retirement party was set for the first Saturday in November. The grand ballroom of the Arlington Memorial Event Center. My mother had sent the invitation by mail, a cream-colored card with gold embossing, addressed to Captain Claire Hendricks. I RSVP'd yes. I bought a new dress. Black, modest, understated. A blazer that fit perfectly. Small gold stud earrings. I did not dress to impress. I dressed to be underestimated. I arrived at 6:15, 15 minutes early. The ballroom was already filling with retired officers, their wives, the old network of my father's career. I took my assigned seat at the back table and smiled at the photographer beside me. "You must be the daughter," she said. "I must be," I said. My father did not greet me. My mother did not acknowledge me. Derek walked past my table without making eye contact. I sat in the chandelier light, surrounded by strangers, and I waited. I waited through the appetizers. I waited through the toasts. I waited through the laughter and the speeches, and the carefully curated nostalgia of a man who had never once asked me about my life. And then my father stood at the microphone, and he pointed at me, and he said the words that he thought would break me. "Everyone here is a success, except my useless child." I did not scream. I did not cry. I set my clutch purse on the empty chair beside me with deliberate precision, the leather making a soft sound against the upholstery, and I noticed the way his left eye twitched when I did not immediately obey. I rose from my seat in silence, and I walked toward the exit, knowing that General Whitfield was standing by the doors, knowing that he had been waiting for this moment for 2 years, knowing that my father's carefully constructed legacy was about to collapse. The truth was ready. And it weighed exactly as much as a bronze star in a grandfather's locket. I did not count my steps as I crossed the marble lobby. I did not look back. The sound of the ballroom doors closing behind me was a soft click, barely audible, but I felt it in my chest like the release of a pressure valve that had been compressed for a decade. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with brass sconces and portraits of men in uniform who had never known my name. My heels struck the floor at a steady rhythm. The envelope in my hand was crisp, official, its weight negligible and infinite at the same time. I reached the exit at the far end of the corridor, pushed through the glass doors, and stepped into the cool November night. The parking lot was half full, the streetlights casting pools of orange light on the wet asphalt. A light rain had started, barely more than mist, settling on my blazer like a second skin. I did not run. I did not hurry. I walked to my car, a modest sedan I had bought used 3 years ago, and I sat in the driver's seat with the door open, letting the rain land on my face. The truth was ready, and I had just used it, but the party was still going on inside. My father was still standing at the microphone, his face pale, his audience silent, his legacy fractured. My mother was still frozen at the head table, her mask cracked, her hands gripping the edge of the tablecloth. Derek was still staring at the empty doorway where I had stood, his mind racing through the implications. They thought that was the ending. They thought the general's intervention, the promotion, the recognition, that was the climax. They thought I had won, that I had taken my victory and walked away, that the story was over. They did not understand that I was just getting started. I pulled out my phone. The screen glowed, reflecting off the windshield. I scrolled to a contact I had saved under a single initial. K. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim answered on the second ring. "Claire," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, the voice of a woman who had seen too many cases to be surprised by anything. "It happened," I said. "Tell me." I did. I told her everything, the speech, the dismissal, the general's intervention, the promotion orders sealed in the envelope on my passenger seat. Sarah was silent for a long moment. Then, "You have the screenshots. From the morning of the party, the group text, my mother, my father, and Derek, they planned it. Good, and the financial records. I have everything. The payments I made through the fake scholarship fund. The $50,000. The bank statements from the college account. That is your mirror value, Claire. That number is going to come back to them. Do you have the original check?" I paused. The check. The one my mother had signed for Derek's tuition, drawn from the family college fund that was actually funded by my combat pay. I had it in the file, photocopied and preserved. "I have it," I said. "Then we have everything we need." I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the headrest. The rain was falling harder now, drumming on the roof of the car. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Meet me at my office tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Bring everything, the file, the envelope, the check, the screenshots. I will prepare the formal commendation order and the reprimand for conduct unbecoming. Conduct unbecoming, against your father, for the public humiliation of a decorated officer. It is a filing, not a charge, a warning, but it will be on record. And it will follow him into his retirement." I opened my eyes and stared at the rain on the windshield. "Good," I said. I drove home through the wet streets of Arlington, past the monuments and the memorials, past the silent houses with their warm windows. I did not turn on the radio. I did not call anyone. I let the windshield wipers mark time. My apartment was dark when I arrived. I did not turn on the lights. I walked to the shelf where I kept the wooden box, opened the lid, and looked at the contents. The locket, the medal, the letter from General Whitfield, dated 2 years ago, thanking me for saving his son's life. I had read that letter 17 times. I knew every word by heart. Captain Hendricks, I do not have the words to express the depth of my gratitude. You acted with courage and selflessness under fire. You are the reason my son is alive. If there is ever anything I can do to honor your service, you need only ask. I had never asked, but General Whitfield had kept his word anyway. I closed the box and placed it back on the shelf. Then I opened the manila folder on my desk, added the envelope from tonight, and reviewed the contents one more time. The bank statements, the screenshots, the check, the timeline, the photos, the voicemail transcripts, the call logs, the email records, 10 years of being invisible, 10 years of being the safety net. And now, finally, the truth. I slept for 4 hours. I woke at 6, dressed in my Class A uniform, pinned the bronze star to my chest for the first time in public, and drove to the base. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim's office was in the JAG building, a squat brick structure near the parade ground. I arrived at 7:45, 15 minutes early. Her assistant waved me in. Sarah was behind her desk, a stack of documents already organized in front of her. She was in her late 40s, with short gray hair and the kind of eyes that missed nothing. She had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, had prosecuted war criminals and defended soldiers, and had never once lost her composure. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Sit, I sat. I placed the manila folder on the edge of her desk. She opened it and began to read. The office was silent except for the rustle of paper and the hum of the heater. I watched her face as she absorbed the evidence. She did not react. She did not flinch. She did not offer sympathy. When she finished, she closed the folder and looked at me. Claire, you have been carrying this family for a decade. You have paid their debts, funded their ambitions, and protected them from the consequences of their own choices. And they have repaid you with contempt. I said nothing. This is not revenge, she continued. This is accountability. You are not doing anything wrong. You are simply stopping your protection and letting the truth be seen. I nodded. The commendation ceremony is scheduled for next Saturday at 1400 hours at the Grand Ballroom of the Arlington Memorial Event Center, the same venue as the retirement party. General Whitfield will present the promotion. I will be present to file the formal commendation, and if your father or any member of your family attempts to interfere, I will file the reprimand for conduct unbecoming. She slid a piece of paper across the desk. This is a proposed timeline. I want you to review it and confirm. I picked it up. The timeline was precise. Each step, each document, each witness, it was a trap. A legal, ethical, untouchable trap. I signed at the bottom and slid it back. Thank you, Sarah, she shook her head. You do not thank me, you do not owe me anything, just show up on Saturday and let the truth do its work. I left her office at 9:17 and walked across the parade ground. The sky was clear, the air cold, the sun low and pale. I stopped at the edge of the grass and looked at the flag flapping at the top of the pole. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but I knew the area code. It was my mother's landline. Claire, we need to talk. Your father is not well. Please call. I stared at the message. They were already trying to pull me back in. Already pretending that I was the one who had done something wrong. Already framing my father's humiliation as a medical crisis, as if his collapse was my fault. I did not reply. I saved the text, added it to the file, and put my phone away. They thought that was the ending. They thought the general's intervention, the promotion, the walkout, that was the climax. They thought I had gotten my moment, and now I would come back, apologize, smooth things over, return to being invisible. They did not know about Sarah. They did not know about the reprimand. They did not know about the check. They did not know that I had stopped protecting them. And they did not know that the ceremony next Saturday was not a celebration of my promotion. It was a public accounting of everything they had done. I walked back to my car and drove to the Texas State Veterans Cemetery. I had not been there in 8 months. The grounds were quiet, the autumn leaves scattered across the paths. I found my grandfather's grave, the headstone simple and honorable. William Bill Hendricks, Sergeant First Class, 2 wars, 3 Purple Hearts, a man who had never once made me feel invisible. I sat on the bench beside his grave and pulled out the locket. I opened it. The bronze star was inside, nestled next to a photograph of my grandfather in uniform, the same photograph I had carried through 3 deployments. I did not speak. I did not pray. I just sat, letting the silence settle around me. His voice echoed in my memory, the words he had said to me when I was 12 and crying because my father had forgotten my birthday. Bravery isn't about never being scared, he had said. It's about doing what's right even when it costs you everything. I had done what was right. I had saved lives, I had served my country, I had protected my family even when they did not deserve it, and now I was going to let them face the cost of their own choices. I closed the locket and slipped it back into my pocket. On Saturday, I would walk back into that ballroom. I would accept my promotion. I would stand in front of the same people who had watched my father humiliate me, and I would let the truth speak for itself. But that was still 6 days away. And in those 6 days, my family had no idea what was coming. They thought they had won. They thought I had left in defeat, saved only by a general's intervention, and that the moment had passed. They were still celebrating at the retirement party, probably drinking the champagne they had reserved for toasts, probably rewriting the evening in their minds, probably telling themselves that I had embarrassed them and that they were the victims. They did not know that I had documentation of every slight, every betrayal, every theft. They did not know that General Whitfield had already contacted the base commander and requested a formal inquiry into the circumstances of my treatment. They did not know that Lieutenant Colonel Kim had already prepared the paperwork. They did not know that the ceremony next Saturday was not a celebration of my career. It was the final scene of a story they had written. And they had just celebrated the victory that would be their undoing. Sarah called me at 9:30 the next morning. I was still in my uniform, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold, the manila folder open in front of me, the screenshots, the bank statements, the check. "Claire, I need you to come back to my office," she said. Her voice was different, tighter. There was something underneath the professional calm that I had not heard before. "What is it?" "I found something." During the deeper search, I ran a full credit and asset trace on your family's accounts, the ones tied to your social security number. I felt my spine straighten. "I will be there in 20 minutes. I drove fast. The streets were wet from overnight rain, the sky a low ceiling of gray clouds. I left my coffee on the counter. Sarah was standing when I entered her office. She had a stack of documents spread across her desk, each one marked with yellow highlighter and red sticky notes. She looked up when I walked in and did not smile. "Sit down, Claire." I sat. She pushed a document toward me. It was a loan application, a home equity line of credit drawn on the family residence in Arlington. The amount was $180,000. The application date was 4 years ago, 3 months after I had been wounded in Afghanistan and sent home for recovery. My name was on the application, my signature, except I had never signed it. "This is a forgery," I said. "Yes, it is." I looked closer. The signature was close but not perfect. The loop on the C was too wide, the R in Claire did not connect properly. "Who filed this?" My contact at the bank flagged it when I ran the trace. "The application was submitted by your mother, Patricia Hendricks, as a co-applicant. She claimed you were deployed and unable to sign in person, so she provided a power of attorney document." Another forgery. Most likely. The power of attorney was notarized by a notary in Arlington, but the notary's license was expired at the time. The bank should have caught it. They did not. I set the document down carefully. "Where did the money go?" Sarah slid another sheet across the desk. A transaction record. The $180,000 had been deposited into a joint account held by my parents and Derek. From there, it had been dispersed in a series of payments. Derek's law school tuition, a down payment on a new car for him, a renovation of the family kitchen, and a vacation to Italy that my parents had taken the following summer. "They used my identity to take out a loan," I said, "and they spent it on themselves. And on Derek." I looked at the numbers. The $180,000. Combined with the $50,000 from the college fund, the total was $230,000. Money I had earned, money they had stolen, money they had spent without a second thought. "There is more," Sarah said. She pulled out another document, a deed of trust, transferring ownership of the family home into a living trust. The trust named my parents and Derek as beneficiaries. I was not included. The deed was dated 2 years ago. My signature was on it, again forged. "They are trying to cut you out of the estate," Sarah said. "If this trust is valid, you inherit nothing. The house, the savings, everything goes to Derek." I stared at the deed. The notary stamp, the official county seal, the forgery so clean that it had passed through the legal system undetected. "How did you find this?" I called in a favor with a title examiner at the county recorder's office. She ran a chain of title search on the property. "The trust was filed 6 months before your father's retirement party. They were planning to finalize the estate before the celebration." I set the deed down beside the loan application. "Can we prove the forgery?" Yes, I have already requested a handwriting analysis from a certified forensic document examiner. She is former FBI. She can have a preliminary report by tomorrow afternoon. And the legal consequences? Sarah leaned back in her chair. Her eyes were steady. Identity theft is a felony. Forgery is a felony. Fraudulent conveyance of property is a civil violation, but it can be referred for criminal prosecution. Your parents and Derek could face charges. Prison time, fines, restitution. I looked at the documents. The evidence of my family's betrayal laid out in black and white, stamped with official seals. They thought they would never get caught, I said. They thought you would never check. I picked up the loan application and held it to the light. The paper was crisp, the ink clear, my name. My social security number, my forged signature. Sarah, I said, I want to file charges. She nodded slowly. Are you sure? I have been carrying them for 10 years. I have paid their debts, covered their mistakes, and protected them from the consequences of their choices. They repaid me by stealing my identity, forging my signature, and cutting me out of my inheritance. I am done. Sarah opened a drawer and pulled out a form. It was a criminal complaint form, standard for the JAG office. She slid it across the desk. Fill this out. I will notarize it and file it with the county prosecutor's office. The complaint will remain sealed until the ceremony. I took the pen she offered. My hand was steady. I filled out the form, name, address, description of the crime. I listed the loan application, the forged power of attorney, the deed of trust. I attached copies of the documents. I signed my name at the bottom, my real signature. My true name. Sarah stamped the form, notarized it, and placed it in a sealed envelope. This will be delivered to the prosecutor on Saturday morning before the ceremony. I nodded. He will not act until after your promotion is complete, but the moment the ceremony ends, the complaint will be served. I looked at the sealed envelope, my family's future contained in a single piece of paper. Thank you, Sarah. Claire, you are doing the right thing. I left her office at 10:47. The sky had cleared slightly, the clouds breaking apart. I stood on the steps of the JAG building and let the cold air fill my lungs. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. We need to talk, your father is very upset, you need to apologize. I did not reply, another buzz, this time from Derek. Hey, can you call mom? She is freaking out, you really embarrassed dad, just say sorry and move on. I saved both messages, added them to the file. Arrogance. Blind, stupid arrogance. They still thought I was the scapegoat. They still thought they could demand an apology, that I would fold, that I would come crawling back to be the invisible daughter again. They did not know about the forged signatures. They did not know about the HELOC. They did not know about the deed of trust. They did not know that I had just signed a criminal complaint against them. They thought they had won. They thought the general's intervention was the end of the story. That I had gotten my moment of recognition, and now I would return to my proper place. The background, the shame, the disappointment. I walked to my car and drove to my apartment. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and closed it behind me. The manila folder was still on the kitchen table. I opened it and added the copies of the loan application, the trust deed, the transaction records. The file was thick now, thick with evidence. Thick with 10 years of silence and service and invisible sacrifice. I sat down and stared at the wall. At 11:23 my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. At 11:24 a voicemail notification appeared. I waited until 11:30 then played the message. Claire, this is your father. I do not know what you think you are doing. You embarrassed me in front of my entire command. You made your mother cry. Derek is humiliated. You need to call me and we need to fix this. I am not going to pretend that I did not say what I said, but you have to understand I was just telling the truth. You have always been difficult. You have always made everything about yourself. This is no different. Call me. I saved the voicemail. I did not call. At 1:15 in the afternoon there was a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. General Whitfield stood in the hallway, dressed in civilian clothes, a leather briefcase in his hand. I opened the door. General. Claire. May I come in? I stepped aside. He walked into my small apartment, looked around at the sparse furniture, the bare walls, the single photograph of my grandfather on the shelf. You live simply, he said. Combat deployments teach you that you do not need much. He nodded. He set his briefcase on the kitchen table and opened it. Inside were folders. The same type of manila folders I had been using. But his were labeled with handwritten tabs. Commendation ceremony, media protocol, legal affidavits, witness statements. I have been preparing, he said. I sat down across from him. Sarah told me about the forgery charges, he said. I want you to know that I support your decision entirely. What your family did is not just cruel, it is criminal. I know. He pulled out a thick envelope stamped with the seal of the base commander. This is your official promotion order. Signed, sealed, effective Saturday at 1400 hours. You will be promoted to major in front of the same people who watched your father dismiss you. I took the envelope. The weight was substantial. There is one more thing, he said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small velvet box. I opened it. Inside was a pin, the insignia of a major in the United States Army, gold oak leaves. I wore this pin for the first time when I was promoted 30 years ago, he said. My wife gave it to me. I want you to have it. General, I cannot accept. You can, you will, you earned it. I looked at the pin. The gold gleamed under the kitchen light. Your grandfather would be proud, he said. I felt the tears building behind my eyes. I did not let them fall. Thank you, he stood. I will see you at the ceremony. Have your evidence ready. Sarah and I will handle the rest. He left. I sat alone in the silence of my apartment, the velvet box in my hand, the promotion order on the table. The hours passed. At 6 in the evening, my phone buzzed again. A text from Derek. Mom is really upset. She says if you don't call by tomorrow, she's going to cut you out of the will for real this time. I almost laughed. They were still threatening me with the inheritance they had already stolen. I saved the text. At 9 o'clock that night, I packed everything into a single briefcase. The manila folder, the criminal complaint, the promotion order, the forged documents, the screenshots, the voicemail transcripts. The check for $50,000, everything. I locked the briefcase and slid it under my bed. If you have ever been asked to apologize for revealing the truth, to shrink yourself so that someone else's pride could stay intact, to accept blame for the wounds they inflicted on you, then you know exactly what I was feeling. I was not going to apologize. I was going to let them face the weight of their own choices. And they had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I met General Whitfield at the base conference room at 7 o'clock. Sarah was already there, her documents organized. A paralegal from the JAG office was photocopying everything. We worked in silence. The general reviewed the timeline. Sarah checked the legal filings. I organized the physical evidence into 3 separate folders, one for the prosecutor, one for the base commander, one for my personal records. The general laid out the logistics. The ceremony starts at 1400 hours. You will be seated at the front of the ballroom next to the podium. At precisely 14:15, I will call you to the stage. I will read the promotion order. I will pin the oak leaves on your collar. Then I will invite you to speak. I am not planning to speak, I said. You do not have to. The evidence will speak for itself. Sarah added, at 14:45, a process server will enter the ballroom. He will serve the criminal complaint to your parents and Derek. The service will be public, witnessed by everyone in the room. I looked at the clock. It was 11 in the morning, 27 hours until the ceremony. My phone buzzed, another text from my mother. You are making a terrible mistake. If you come to the ceremony, you will regret it. I saved the text. General Whitfield looked at me. They are still trying to intimidate you. Yes. Are you going to let them? I closed the folder. No. I spent the rest of the day in my apartment, reviewing the evidence one last time. I touched the locket around my neck, the bronze star hidden inside. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. Bravery is about doing what's right even when it costs you everything. I was doing what was right, and it was going to cost them everything. At midnight, I stood at the window of my apartment and looked out at the quiet street. The moon was full, casting silver light on the pavement. They had no idea what was waiting for them in that ballroom. They had no idea that the celebration they were preparing for would be the scene of their undoing. And they had no idea that I was no longer their daughter. I was their reckoning. The stage was set. The evidence was ready. The players were in position. And the family that had spent a decade erasing me was about to learn that I had been writing the final chapter all along. The ballroom was exactly as I remembered it. The same chandeliers, the same polished floors, the same gold braid and medals and forced smiles. But the air was different tonight. It was charged, expectant, the silence of a room holding its breath. I arrived at 13:45, 15 minutes early. I wore my Class A uniform, the bronze star pinned above my left pocket, the gold oak leaves of my new rank waiting in General Whitfield's briefcase. My hair was pulled back in a tight, precise bun. My heels were polished. My face was still. I walked through the doors and felt the eyes land on me, some curious, some hostile, some afraid. My mother was seated at the front table, her back straight, her hand gripping a champagne flute. She wore a navy silk dress, expensive and understated, her pearls catching the light. She did not look at me. My father sat beside her, his face pale, his jaw tight. He wore his dress uniform, the same one he had worn at his retirement party, the medals polished. He also did not look at me. Derek stood near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was talking to a woman I did not recognize, his girlfriend probably, the one he had been dating for 2 years. I had never been introduced to her. I took my seat at the front of the ballroom, next to the podium, as General Whitfield had instructed. The chair was velvet, deep burgundy. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, my briefcase on the floor beside me. At 1400 hours exactly, General Whitfield stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We are gathered here to recognize the service and sacrifice of one of our finest officers. He spoke for several minutes. He described my deployments, my actions in Afghanistan, the lives I had saved, the medals I had earned. I did not listen, I watched the room. My father's hands were shaking. My mother's smile was frozen. Derek was staring at the floor. And now, General Whitfield said, I have the honor of reading the promotion order. He read the official language. The words were ancient and formal, the same words that had promoted soldiers for generations. When he finished, he looked at me. Major Claire Hendricks, please approach the stage. I rose, I walked to the podium. The general pinned the gold oak leaves to my collar, his hands steady. Congratulations, Major, he said. Thank you, General. He stepped back. The room applauded, polite and restrained. Then my father stood. He walked to the microphone. His face was red, his eyes bright with something between anger and desperation. If I may, he said, without waiting for permission, I would like to say a few words. The room fell silent. He turned to face the audience, then he looked at me. I am proud of my daughter, he said. The words sounded hollow, forced. I have always been proud. The other night at my retirement party, I said some things that I regret. I was under a lot of pressure. I did not mean what I said. He paused, waiting for me to respond. I said nothing. Claire, I am sorry. Can we just move on? Can we just be a family again? I looked at him. At the man who had pointed at me and called me useless in front of 200 people. At the man who had signed a forged loan application using my stolen identity. At the man who had spent my combat pay on a kitchen renovation. Major, General Whitfield said, his voice neutral. Do you wish to respond? I stepped to the microphone. I opened my briefcase. I pulled out a single document, the check. The one my mother had signed for Derek's tuition, drawn from the family college fund. The one that had been funded by my combat pay. This check, I said, holding it up, is for $50,000. It was written from the Hendricks family college fund to cover Derek's final semester at Georgetown. My mother stiffened. The money in that account came from automatic allotments from my military pay. Every month for 3 years, I sent money home to cover expenses. I never told you, you never asked. I set the check on the podium and pulled out the loan application. This is a home equity line of credit for $180,000 drawn on the family residence in Arlington. It was applied for 4 years ago. My signature was forged. I pulled out the deed of trust. This is a deed transferring ownership of the family home into a living trust. It was filed 2 years ago. My signature was forged again. I was named as no beneficiary. The room was silent. Absolute crushing silence. Major, what are you saying? General Whitfield asked. I am saying that my family stole my identity, forged my signature on a loan and a legal deed, and used the money to pay for my brother's education, a new car for him, a kitchen renovation, and a vacation to Italy. They cut me out of my inheritance, and then they stood at a microphone and called me useless. My father's face was white. Claire, that is not, do not, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. Do not lie to me again, I have the evidence, I have the bank statements, the notary records, the handwriting analysis. I have a criminal complaint filed with the county prosecutor. It was served 30 seconds ago. A man in a dark suit entered the ballroom. He walked to my mother's table and handed her a thick envelope. Then he handed one to my father, then one to Derek. My mother stared at the envelope like it was a snake. What is this? She whispered. A felony complaint, I said. Identity theft, forgery, fraudulent conveyance of property, each of you is named. My daughter is pressing charges against us, my father said, his voice breaking. I looked at him, at the man who had spent 40 years believing he was the center of the universe, at the man who had never once asked me if I was okay. I am not pressing charges, father. I am presenting the evidence and letting the law decide. I am done protecting you. Derek stood up, his face was flushed. You are ruining our lives. Mom and Dad did everything for you. They used my deployment pay to fund your law degree, Derek. I saved for 3 years to help you and you never said thank you. You never even asked where the money came from. He opened his mouth, closed it. My mother stood. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was cold. Claire, what will people think? Mother, I do not care what people think. I have spent 17 years caring what people think. I am done. Turned to General Whitfield. General, I believe the ceremony is concluded. He nodded. It is, Major. I gathered my documents. I placed them in my briefcase. I closed the latches. I looked at my family one last time. I kept your secrets for 10 years. I paid your debts. I covered your mistakes. I bled for your comfort, and you repaid me with contempt. I picked up the check. The $50,000, the mirror value of my own sacrifice. This money is mine. It was always mine. And I am taking it back. I walked toward the exit. Behind me, my mother's voice rose. You cannot do this. We are your family. I did not stop. My father shouted something, but I did not hear the words. The doors closed behind me and the ballroom disappeared. General Whitfield met me in the hallway. Sarah was there too, her briefcase in hand. It is done, Sarah said. Yes, they will be taken into custody tonight. The prosecutor has enough to hold them overnight. You will need to testify. I will. General Whitfield placed a hand on my shoulder. That took courage, Major. No, General, that took evidence and patience. We walked out into the cold November air. The stars were visible, sharp and bright. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. The consequences began before I reached my car. My phone buzzed. A contact I had saved years ago, the mortgage officer at the bank where my parents had taken the HELOC. Major Hendricks, I am calling to inform you that the HELOC on your parents' property has been frozen pending the forgery investigation. The full balance of $180,000 is now due immediately. I did not reply. Another buzz. A message from Derek's girlfriend, whom I had never met. Your brother just called me. He said the engagement ring he bought me is being repossessed. He used the HELOC money for the down payment. What did you do? I did not reply. A third buzz, my mother's landline. I let it ring. They were unraveling. The structure they had built on lies and stolen money was collapsing. The HELOC was called. The trust was void. The forged deeds were being flagged. The prosecutor's office was opening a formal investigation. I drove home, showered, and changed into civilian clothes. I did not answer my phone. I did not check my messages. At 10 o'clock that night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it. My father stood in the hallway. He was in civilian clothes, his face haggard, his eyes red. Claire, father, please, you have to drop the charges. Your mother is in crisis. Derek's engagement is over. The bank is calling the loan. We are going to lose the house. I said nothing. Please, I know I have not been a good father. I know I have failed you, but I am begging you. I looked at him. The man who had built his life on the foundation of my invisibility. The man who had stolen from me and called me useless. I will not drop the charges, I said, but I will offer you one thing. What? The truth. Admit what you did, publicly, to everyone who was at the retirement party. Tell them that you lied, that you stole from me, that I am not useless. Tell them the truth. His face crumpled. I cannot do that. My reputation, your reputation is already destroyed, father. The only question is whether you will leave it in ruins or build something honest on top of it. He stared at me. I closed the door. I did not hear from him again that night. 6 months passed. I received a letter from my mother's attorney informing me that the family home had been sold to satisfy the HELOC. My father had taken early retirement, his pension reduced. Derek had moved to another state, his law license under review for character and fitness concerns related to the forgery charges. My mother had not spoken to me. She had not written. She had not called. I was not surprised. My father sent a letter. It was short, handwritten, the script shaky. Claire, I have told everyone the truth. I wrote a letter to the base newspaper. I told them about the forged signatures, the stolen money, the way I treated you. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I am just trying to do the right thing now, even though it is too late. I am sorry. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it in the wooden box with my grandfather's locket and my bronze star. I did not reply. I did not need to. The partial redemption of my father was his own, not mine. I had stopped being responsible for him a long time ago. I drove to the Texas State Veterans Cemetery on a warm Saturday in May. The grass was green, the sky clear, the birds singing in the live oaks. I parked my car and walked the familiar path to my grandfather's grave. I sat on the bench beside his headstone, the same bench I had sat on the night before the ceremony. I opened my grandfather's locket. The photograph of him was faded, the edges soft. I touched his face with my fingertip. I did it, Grandpa, I whispered. I told the truth. The wind moved through the trees. A bird called out. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated. I felt something quieter, something steadier. I felt peace. The 5 hard truths settled into my bones like the weight of a metal pin to my chest. First, a narcissistic parent's love is conditional on your usefulness to their image. I had mistaken their silence for approval, their neglect for independence. I had spent years trying to earn something they were never capable of giving. Never mistake silence for approval. It was a lesson I had learned in firefights and family dinners alike. Second, boundaries are not punishments. They are the price of admission to your life. If someone will not pay it, they do not get in. I had given my family years of free entry. I had let them walk through me like a door. The moment I locked the door, they called me cruel. But boundaries are not cruelty. They are the cost of honesty. Third, the family scapegoat is often the most competent member, the one who holds everything together while being blamed for everything. I had paid their bills, I had saved their lives, I had bled for them, and they blamed me for being absent. That is the pattern. The scapegoat carries the weight and bears the shame. The moment you set the weight down, they realize how heavy it was. Fourth, seeking closure from an abuser is like expecting a snake to stop being venomous. I had waited 10 years for an apology that never came. I had waited for my mother to see me, my father to respect me, my brother to thank me. That closure never arrives. Your peace is not found in their apology, it is found in your own acceptance. Fifth, true honor comes from who you are when no one is watching, not from the spotlight your family gives you. I had been a soldier in the dark. I had served a country that would never know my name. I had saved lives that would never thank me. And that was enough. That had always been enough. I looked at the locket in my hand. You gave me this when I was 12, I said to my grandfather's headstone. You told me to carry my honor inside where no one could take it. You were right. I closed the locket and slipped it into my pocket. I stood. I looked at the cemetery, the rows of white headstones stretching toward the horizon. If you have ever been the invisible one, the one who held the family together while they called you a burden, the one who paid the price while they took the credit, know that your truth matters. Your story matters. You matter. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Send it, forward it, read it to a friend who is still in the room where they are being dismissed. Because you are not alone. And you never were. I walked back to my car. The sun was warm on my face. The sky was endless and blue. Keep your boundaries strong. Guard your peace, and I will see you in the next.